Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 108 of the Noclip podcast. Danny here with a special guest, but we'll get to them in a second. First of all, Mr. Frank Howley, how are you, sir? I see you dancing on TikTok. What's going on down in SoCal?
Yeah, dude, I've been playing Persona 4, and it's teaching me the power of friendship and just going outside, especially on Saturdays. So I've been biking, hiking, and then I don't know why I now am like all in on TikTok. I like it. It used to scare me. I didn't understand its science, and now I'm like fully in. And now I've broken like the tipping point, and now I'm like making a TikTok every day, not consciously,
Right.
but when I'm exercising or hiking, I feel like a rush of euphoria, and I feel like confident, and I'm like, well, I could do this stupid TikTok, like, or I'll have a German of an idea. Also, Megan came out weeks ago, and it's so good. So I've been practicing the dance, and I had to show it off.
I like it. Jeremy,
Yeah.
I saw pictures of you in the woods with some mushrooms. Have you been getting euphoric on your hikes?
I've been finding a lot of mushrooms for the last week, mostly gourmet and not hallucinogenic, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on your predilection towards these things. But yeah, I found some chanterelles, some black trumpets, a bunch of other stuff. Yeah, it's been awesome. It's
You
like
could be making these. They all sound like strains of cannabis.
I found some flim flams, some bing bongs, all the normal mushrooms. And this is the only thing I have to say. This is my pitch for gamers to get into mushroom hunting. It's basically Pokemon. It's basically you're filling up a Pokédex of like mushrooms you found.
I love it. Thanks very much. Jeremy Jane, Frank Howley, Danny O'Dwyer. We wanted to make sure that you were as isolated as possible, Jeremy, so we got a third Irish surname on the podcast this week. Jess O'Brien, Voidburger herself, of freelance fame.
Yes, apparently now.
Thank you so much for joining us this week.
Thanks for having me. Wow, cool.
Sorry it had to be under such a annoying, bad, terrible circumstances. Obviously, the giant bomb and GameSpot layoffs last Thursday, I guess it was, it happened.
Yeah.
I was immediately on the blower to see if you wanted to hop on here and just hang out and get yourself out there and how has it been? How is your, it's a shitty question to ask.
I know,
how's your week been?
It's a normal question to ask. It has not been horrific. If you asked me a couple months ago, or I don't even know, if you asked me when I first got hired, like, do you ever see yourself getting laid off? It's like, of course you'd say no. How would you feel? I'd be like absolutely devastated. But you know what? Like, people have been so ridiculously kind to me about this and like righteously pissed about this for me, which like as an ex-New Yorker, like there's no greater love than like someone being like furious for you for something that happened to you. Like, you want me to kill them for you? Like that kind of like love is something that like directly like hits me where it
furious
counts.
Empathy.
Yeah, so I mean, it's been it's definitely has softened the blow. People have been like more than generous, incredibly kind, and like just like even if they're not like giving me money on like Twitch or Patreon, just like tons of people have come out of the woodwork to be like, I can't believe this, like you're so talented and this is bullshit and stuff like that. So it's been not as bad as I thought it would be for something like this to happen.
Fair play. I hate that you have to be able to like take it on the chin this well. There was a specific type of cruelty around this one that really just like I think pissed people off. Just the sort of corporate willy-nilliness of who gets fired and when and how they find out and how everyone it just seemed so cold and brutal.
I think this is the first giant bomb like layoff, firing, leaving the site situation where it happened like in the middle of a show practically, because we were doing the pre-show for Blight Club when all of a sudden there was like a big like emergency meeting.
Was that your episode of Blight Club?
Never mind. No, not yet.
Okay,
we have quite a while until I would have had to have played anything. Because like the way we were doing it was like Dan was playing Sonic 06, but there's 3 parts of Sonic 06 for each of the 3 characters. So we went from Sonic to like, wait a minute, why is he doing all this? We're gonna make Grub play something terrible, which is Bubsy 3D, and then we were gonna go back to Sonic, and then I had to play Earthworm Jim 64.
Oh man,
you're gonna Jimish it, and I don't think I'm gonna Jart it at this point, let alone Jimish it, because look what happened. And then we're gonna finale it with Sonic 06 again because it's the game that just keeps on giving with how horrible it is.
Bubsy weirdly came up in an interview I did last week for our Wipeout documentary, where the original Bubsy was the music was done by the guy I was interviewing. It'll come up in a few weeks' time over there. That's crazy. Jeremy, was there? I'm trying to remember. We had a couple of those days at GameSpot, right, where there was like just everyone goes into a room. And where's 6 of everyone, right?
Yeah, the scariest one of all was I went down to do a The Sims 4 event with Kevin Van Ord down in like San Mateo or something. And it was this very kind of like light, it's like The Sims. So it's like, it's the lightest possible trip you could imagine.
Yeah, with Kevin, who's just like that.
Yeah, exactly. Who's like an incredibly jovial man. And then we both got very ominous texts. And the whole drive back up, we were both kind of like, who's going to be fired? Is it us? Is it like people, that we care about, friends of ours? So it's just, there's nothing good about it.
That was the one with Carolyn and most of the video team. And
Tom McShay.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, it was a fucking call. So yeah, I guess like, when did you join GB? Was it over a year?
It was kind of a weird, like I was doing like a freelancey contracty work thing, and then I got hired on. So it's kind of like a wishy-washy gradient of when did I start at Giant Bomb, but I believe I got signed on in August of 2021.
Okay. So it was a year and a half. And there was something like triumphant about you coming on, because obviously you're an online person. You've been like on, various parts of the internet people know you from. I actually had, I was talking to H Bomber guy a few weeks ago. We were chatting and your name came up as somebody as well who he remembers from, what was it, like was it something awful, or was it like a
something
YouTube?
Awful forums,
like so, and then obviously like as a fan of Giant Bomb, and I came from a similar position. I was like a big fan of the site. I technically never worked for Giant Bomb, except I guess I did the contract stuff 2 years ago. But
that's so weird. Oh my god, you haven't technically.
No, we were all GameSpot people. I just kind of wandered over because all the cool kids were over making fun videos over there, and we got paid over here. But it was really cool to see, and you brought a lot of that, like, creativity, but obviously like the joy of somebody who got their fucking shot.
Yeah, like it's been nothing but surreal the entire time, right? Like I don't know exactly how I got on GB's radar, but I did make that Phantasmagoria 2 Puzzle of Flesh video essay, and I don't know who. Maybe somebody sent it to Jan or Bacalar or something like that. But I also was messing around in like Clip Studio Paint. I always mess up the name of that program. And I was like, I'm trying to get used to this program. I should draw something. And the Bombcast was on. So I decided I'm just going to draw Jan. He stays still most of these people, I think. So, and then I was like, hey, I'll just send it to him. And it ended up on like the community like post that they do weekly on the site. And it's like, oh, was that the thing that like kind of bumped me into like the area of interest there? And
a random sketch you did someday.
Yeah, I don't know. But like, and then one day Jan DM'd me and I was just like, what? Who's DMing me? Like, what? And like was, gauging my interest in like a collab of some sort. And then I laid on the ground and laughed and / cried because it was so weird.
So, I mean, you've had like not less than a week to sort of process some of this sort of stuff, but I'm just interested, like in your, you were a year and a half there. Like, what parts of the job did you love, and what parts were? Because I had the very envious position of being able to just kind of like dance in and have fun and then dance out. I never had to get involved in like the dynamics of a big team like that, and trying to like create content that works for this legacy fan base while also trying to build new fans, and also trying to like be a helpful video producer, and in your case a helpful video producer and a host, and all that sort of stuff. So how was the year and a half? Did you learn a lot? What did you enjoy about it? What was the stuff that's maybe not as fun, but it's just part of this type of work that you kind of are aware of?
Yeah. Crazy awesome learning experience just in general. And like I've never worked for a corporation, like a big company before. Now
you've worked for several.
Hey, right. So preferably I'd like to never do that again. I think the only what I would say bad or unfortunate part of the job is that it is run by a corporation, and oftentimes their whims or movements. They move in very mysterious, confusing ways. Huge emphasis on things that I don't understand, like just growth. Like, I know what that means, but like, what do you mean? Like, just kind of like, I'm more sustainably minded, and it's just like, do we need all the money in the world? Like, I don't get that. And like, that was the main source of like, when there was frustrations, I feel like the main source was just like, I don't know why we're being told to do this. Like, I don't get that. It feels a little more like organic or straightforward to do these like smaller, more community minded things than do these kind of weird, vague sort of like shifts in a direction where it's just like, okay, are we doing TikTok? Are we doing Twitch? What are we really doing here? And of course, that kind of mushed up around the acquisition between those two companies, and then things all nebulously shifted a slightly different way. And it's like, okay, I have no idea what the vision is right now. And that's like nobody's fault. That's just like the machine do that for some reason. Like, I don't really understand the workings.
Yeah,
I guess it's not for me to know, though. I don't know.
Well, it's what you're saying that, and I feel like a lot of that is reflected from the outside looking in, where I don't think anyone knows what direction games coverage is pointing in anymore. Like,
yeah,
there was maybe 5 years ago you could say, oh, it's turning or maybe 10 years ago you could say, oh, it's subscription models with these smaller communities, and then obviously Giant Bomb's lack of independence, sort of since CBS even, is kind of, there's a conflict there when you're corporate owned, but you're running what is meant to be this sort of grassrootsy thing, especially in a post-Patreon world where the grassroots nature of it is often the thing that is the big selling point for patronage. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think like the more like corporate owned a thing is, the less like individualistic it is just by nature. There's too many cooks. Like, there's all these people that you don't even know probably that are pulling strings somewhere or other. And it's like, how do you make like a personality based sort of experience for people that, you want to be genuine, you want to be real and sincere, but it's like, where are the limitations of that? How does that fit into the growth model? Like, it's just like, can you have a model like that while still being sincere is like just something that like philosophically I've been like curious about. And like, it's been hard to kind of like put into words and like figure it out. And it's like, I feel like I just have to not figure it out because it's not for me to understand. I don't know. It's weird. But like, besides, really that was like the only real major, like, stick in the mud was just corporations, powers that be, doing very strange things that I couldn't understand. Other than that, like, everybody was a fucking joy to work with, like absolute professionals, so talented, extremely cool and welcoming to me, and just like, total cool people. That's all I can say about that. Like, I don't know.
I feel as well that, like, especially in this sort of, I hate to say post-pandemic, but you know what I mean, post-start of the pandemic world we find ourselves in, that one of the things that I didn't really understand at the time that was so sad was that, like, my friendship with Carolyn wasn't as there. You know what I mean? She came to my housewarming party in Oakland years later, but, like, I didn't see her every day anymore. I didn't see a lot of those people. That fucking sucked.
Yeah, it's weird because like I wouldn't have gotten hired if the pandemic didn't happen because I'm in the middle of friggin' nowhere, right? Like, so it's like, who would hire someone in the middle of Illinois, not even Chicago, to work, be a video producer for something that's now kind of like split up on two different coasts. So being on neither is not great, right? Unless everyone's working from home and everyone's cool with that. So it's very weird to like be like, thanks COVID for that. Like, like it's a weird, like, I don't know, have a little bit of like, I don't know, survivor's guilt about that. I don't know. It's a strange mishmash of emotions with regards to that particular aspect.
Well, you don't have to worry about the survivor's guilt anymore, I guess.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
You can knock that to the side.
I still have it though, because like, with 2 of the 3 like video producers gone, it's like,
oh yeah,
oh my God, Jan's got to be absolutely swamped like no human being ought to be. And it's like, that's my survivor's guilt, is I don't have to be in his position where it's like you technically survived, but is it worth it when you have that much work to make up for because all these other people got laid off? Like, I don't envy anybody right now that remains at Giant Bomb, because it's just like it's got to be an avalanche that they're dealing with.
That's the senselessness of like, you try and look at the news as you read it on the paper, and morally you just, especially when it's friends and people, colleagues and people that you respect and like and love, that you're like, oh, I want to find the reason why this is the worst decision they could make. But even if you look at this divorced of any of that, firing 2 of the 3 video producers on a video focused outlet seems completely ridiculous.
There's no sense in it. And like, and that's what I'm talking about when I say like, like I don't understand corporations or why they move the way they do, because it's like from a very clear logical standpoint, that seems like one of the worst things you could possibly like do. And it's like, folks will be like, I'm sure there's a reason. It's like, I don't know if there is a reason. Like, it's so bizarre.
From what I have heard, sorry to cut you off. From what I have divulged from folks, it sounds like the decisions of who seem to have come from people who were not involved at all on any of the acquisition side that came over from RV, including people who came as part of that, who aren't on camera or anything. So it does look like and I mean, I know people who work at fandom who aren't part of that as well, who have, it wasn't just GameSpot and Giant Bomb, there was also people in other aspects of the company as well that have lost their jobs. So I don't know, how does any of that sort of shit happen?
It was sweeping and it was weird, and like, when they pulled us into the little meetings, and I also saw Justin there, Justin Vachon,
right,
the graphic designer for GameSpot, Metacritic, Giant Bomb, like a whole TV Guide, like a whole swath of these companies, and of course Jason Eastreicher, who is irreplaceably like he's Jason. Like how could I, like I saw them in the meeting and I was like, oh, I'm probably safe if they're both here. Like that's what I was thinking. I was just like, I'm probably fine.
So you're in a little Zoom meeting with like was that what it was, with all the people who were getting fired?
Yeah. So they kind of split people up, and we were talking in Slack, being like, are we in different meetings? Just like, oh fuck, like that's not good. So. But I was like, no way they're firing Jason. No way they're firing Justin, because he does so much for so many of these different brands.
Right.
It would be bonkers, and he works his ass off, and it's like they did that to him too. Like, geez Louise, like absolute cannot wrap my brain around it. So woof.
Jeremy, I remember when we were working at GameSpot at CBS that we used to envy Giant Bomb's sort of, they were kind of small enough that the corporate shit of it almost didn't matter to that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They were sort of, GameSpot was often being pulled this direction or that direction, or crazy managers coming in or whatever it was that was like this. And Giant Bomb, for the longest part, felt like it was just because Giant Bomb, first of all, seemed to be making money every year, which was not the case at GameSpot. And then also because it was the subscription model stuff, which was very kind of like sexy as well back in, for a big corporation that didn't do that sort of stuff. This is before every video media house in the world had their own app on, where you could sign up for $5 a month and do something. Like it was doing a lot. Do you remember what it was like there? Because I know you didn't have as much interaction with the GB folks, but like I remember that feeling of like, oh, they're so lucky, they're flying under the radar and also like making money. That must be cool.
Yeah, it always seemed like I always felt like we were doing more kind of like buckling down in the wrong ways or something. Like I felt like they were having way more fun than we were, and were somehow more successful. I felt like I spent a lot more time in SEO meetings than felt necessary, and I don't know, all of that stuff. Like I understand the utility of those things, and I understand that when the larger the corporation gets, the more you need to think about those ways to kind of like orient it in the direction of trends and make sure you're moving into, topics and what types of content that people want to watch and whatever. But I always kind of felt just like, to me, it felt like the people on the bottom of the totem pole, the people who wrote things and filmed things and edited things, had an intuitive sense of what sorts of videos would be good, what sorts of articles would be good, because it's the things that they intuitively would want to make, and therefore the things that people would kind of resonate with or want to consume. And so it always felt very weird to me, and I always had envy towards Giant Bomb a little bit, because I was like, I feel like they're just making the kind of cool shit that they want to make. Yeah, exactly. And I feel like that's why the subscription model works, is because people, you know, like that it's trite to say it's like authentic or whatever, but I really do feel like there's a level on which that authenticity is the bigger the boat gets, the harder it is to retain that. But I think that's kind of, you know, that's what's for sale for me when I'm consuming any sort of video or writing about video games, is like I want to enjoy those things through the lens of that person. I value their perspective as like an individual or as a small group of people, and I think the farther you get away from that, it's like, you know, graphics comparisons have there's something useful about them.
Gotta make that bread, man.
But I'm never watching the like, oh, this is the PS4 version. I'm like, man, I'm watering it up a little bit in the eyes, and like this is really moving me. You know, I don't know. It just feels like it felt like they were making things that felt more valuable on a deeper level or something, because of the nature of the smaller team, the flying under the radar stuff, etc.
Yeah, and I think that simply, like, you know, I can't speak to it because it was before my time, but I think like perhaps that, you know, the pandemic kind of made that more difficult to do.
Yeah.
Just generally, it was probably harder. I imagine, like, if you're working in an office, like a Giant Bomb style office, and you're making content and, you know, goofing around, it would probably be way easier to just come up to someone's desk, be like, hey, you busy right now? No? Okay, come over here. We're going to do something goofy.
Yeah.
I don't really get to do that on, you know, Slack or Zoom or whatever, because there is these like different meetings and stuff like that, and people are doing, you know, who knows what on their own. You know, you don't get to like check in on people the same way you might at office. So I imagine that, you know, puts a damper on the spontaneity of making kind of just whatever your heart desires.
It's funny you mentioned that as well, because like one of the things that comes up in when I, you know, because I'm still like in Giant Bomb forums and on Reddit and all that sort of stuff, and one of the things that comes up a lot is the and it's not just a Giant Bomb thing, but like the eras that you get when, especially post, you know, COVID starting, where you have everything remote, and that you do miss some of that spontaneity, and also the eras prior to that where sometimes there was more interesting stuff being made. And I think at different times, and what I think I found interesting when I first moved to SF was who was the person sort of going around to the desks and getting stuff done. I think I can't tell for sure because I was only there for a short time before his untimely passing, but Ryan was a bit of sort of like one of those. He was kind of like a caustic presence in the room, which I think was it was like, to me, it reminds me of like when you have an old dog or an old cat, and you get another one that's like a bit younger and it's a bit angrier, and it sort of fucking makes them both, you know, makes the old one shake up a bit. That, to me, that was a bit Ryan and Gersman, but I was only there for a little bit. But it was when like Vinny was the guy who would come over and like get stuff done and pull people together. And
I can absolutely see that. Like, you know, I can also see like Dan being the person.
100%. He was the other one.
Like, I feel like, you know, Dan is amazing. He's been awesome as like a creative director person, because he does have that kind of like easy momentum, sort of like not just like the willingness, but like the passion to do something goofy and just commit to the bit and just go like, we're gonna do this and here it is and we're going. And like that was especially needed in like the post-COVID work from home era, where it's like you are really kind of trying to ice skate uphill, if you'll accept a Bladeism.
A Blade reference.
Because it's like everyone, you know, it's hard to get the social chutzpah, the moxie, the high that comes from collaborating when it is through a screen and all that stuff. You're missing out on that physicality. That's definitely, you know, something that is really hard to replicate, you know, and in the Zoom era.
And especially because you're in a position of being a video producer, right, which Vinny was as well. So he was like able to, and as you would have been able to, create ideas and see them through to the end. And when you're not working in an office, you can't tell how busy people are. Like, you're not going to go up to somebody and ask if they're busy. But if you're working remote, like, you've no idea how busy anyone is.
No clue.
So you're not going to ask them to do something or like,
yeah,
I have this idea, you know? Yeah, so it just adds to the whole issue.
Like it's harder to even like get people on quick looks, like
Right.
especially if it's something like, I'm a little more geared toward kind of stranger indie-ish or horror stuff and,
Oh, we
things
hate
that
that
are
stuff
not...
here, don't we, Jeremy?
That's probably my favorite description of any game ever. Is like India.
Yes.
Jess, I just as an aside, are you a big Signalis fan? You strike me as someone who likes
Oh,
Signalis. Okay.
yeah, buddy.
All right, cool.
Don't ask about immortality.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No. All right. Cool. At least we have some common ground.
No, Signalis was my second place game of the year on my list.
Okay. Wait. What was number one? Because it was my number one. So I'm so curious.
My number one was Pentiment.
Oh yeah. Okay. Pentiment was my number two. All right.
Yeah.
Hey, look at that.
Hell
Perfect. Very compatible.
Awesome.
But yeah, it was like a little bit difficult to like, get people jazzed for like, hey, join me on this weird little indie thing. Like Jan was very like game for it, and Grub was also like second place most game for those things. But a lot of other people were kind of just like vaguely busy, and I don't know,
Yeah.
I don't know when, like, so it was a little more difficult to like arrange that than I assume it would be in an office when you could just peek over and see what someone's up to or not.
Yeah, and like I remember the vibe of that, because like the Giant Bomb office part was also like very quiet. Like usually it was just a bunch of them with their headphones on their fucking computers. Like when Dan was there, he was kind of like the guy going, "Hey, let's go do this," or and that's just what he's like. Like that's not
Great impression of
That's
him.
pretty good.
He came and there's a picture floating around of me and him with the guy from Home Improvement, Al Borland from Home Improvement.
Oh my God, yes, I saw that recently on Twitter.
So
he
he-
was like bragging about that.
Yeah, so him and his wife were like just visiting me and my wife and my kid in Maryland, in like outside Annapolis, where like nothing ever happens. And we were just driving past like one of the churches on the way back from town, and he was like, "Oh my God, have you seen?" Like, I was like, Al Borland is going to be at this like.
Richard Karn is
Sorry,
his name.
Richard
I don't
Karn.
know. I don't know why I know that off the top of my head, but I do.
He did dip his toes into he said NFTs aren't for me. Remember on Twitter, and then
He almost did an NFT, and then everyone got pissed off at him, and he was like, "Never mind,"
not
and
for
everybody
me.
was like,
Yeah.
"Cool, nice."
So we were just like on the way home, and he sees that like there's this garden center show and Richard Karn is there, and he's like, we have to go and I gotta see it, we're gonna photograph it, it'll be amazing. And like I'm just immediately full of like social anxiety of like, I do not want to walk into this place. I am dressed like the way I'm dressed. I do not belong here. It's
How are you dressed?
I don't know, it's just like not like rural Maryland farm show.
You didn't
I'm
have your
gonna say that.
overalls, dude. You didn't have your overalls
Yeah.
and flannel in the car. You
Haven't got my
changed.
jo-
Your emergency flannel
Yeah.
in case something like this.
case
I had
social
a John
cohesion
Deere.
is needed.
I had a John Deere at home, but I didn't have my like John Deere cap or waistcoat.
I hope you opened
Jacket
with
on.
that. Just mentioned. By the way, I'm Danny, and I have a John Deere at home. I just
I
want,
don't have a John Deere
just
at
want
home,
that
yeah.
out there.
I cut the grass. It's great.
Yeah.
I didn't bring the waistcoat with me, but trust me.
So we turn up at this place, and like, first of all, we all have to like pay in. So it's like four of us. I guess my kid was like 3 months old or something. So we go into this.
How much do Richard Karn
It
tickets
was like
go
£5,
for?
I think, or whatever. But then we had to walk
Quid,
through
okay.
this whole place of like everyone showing off, like I'm selling fucking windows and I'm selling drain pipes and all this shit. And we get to the end, and Richard Karn is just standing up on the stage telling stories. So we like wait for 30 minutes for him to tell his stories. My kid's like bored out of her mind and all this. And then like we go up and take a picture. But that's like that Dan just does that for good or ill. He will just like, he's like a dog in heat. He sees what he wants to do and he goes and does it. And
He goes and fucks Richard
goes
Karn.
and
He
fucks,
sees him and he
exactly, yeah.
goes. Yeah.
humps his leg. I have those photographs too.
No, like his spontaneity is like a huge asset, like especially like I said in this environment where it is harder to be spontaneous,
But I do wonder how hard it is to like that works better in person. If he messaged me, hey, let's go to the Richard Karn thing, I'm coming up with an excuse. You know what I mean? Whereas if and what I used to like about him, or what I used to like about going to do quick looks, was that like when you're in an office environment and then you get to go into a studio and be on camera and talk and have the microphone, there's like an energy shift there. And I feel like when you're sitting in front of your computer and you're editing something and then you're going to record this remote type of video, it's not the same. You know what I mean? It doesn't have that same thing.
I really like one of my great regrets that is completely out of my hands is that I didn't get to experience the Giant Bomb office,
Right.
And also as a result, like it took me a long time to feel like I worked at Giant Bomb because I hadn't met any of these people until the Bombathon in was that September?
Right,
October.
yeah.
October.
That was
And then
in
it's
New
like
York,
suddenly,
right?
yeah, that was in Brooklyn. And that was wild. I got to meet everybody, and it's like, okay, dope. I've arrived. Anyway, like 4 months later, I'm out. Like, I got laid off. Like, oh, whoops. I just felt like I got here, That sucks.
The state of games journalism just this past week has been like really depressing to watch.
Yeah, like when I got into this, I was like, let's see how long they let me stay
Right.
here, because like I'm on Twitter too much. I see all the constant upheavals. It like every month or so, like you see like this huge layoff come for somebody that completely didn't deserve it and came out of the blue, and it's like it felt like an any day now situation from like day one, just
Right.
because I'm a bit of a pessimist. So, lasting a year and change, not bad.
Yeah.
Considering the tumultuousness of this industry, not too bad.
And a lot of good work done, and a lot of I forget, somebody said it during the week, or it's probably just a tweet or something, where it's like it used to be you get fired from a job if you were like bad at it or the company was doing bad, and now it seems like the company can make record profits and you can be really good and still get let go.
Yeah.
It's just like a whole other fucking universe.
Bizarre.
Frank's been sorry, I haven't gone to Frank at all yet because he hasn't got much experience in traditional corporate work. But what I love about Frank is that he was sort of like an internet dirtbag from the start with all the Mega 64 stuff. Because I remember, Frank, when we first were like sort of like chatting years and years and years ago before you were doing anything for us, you were always looking at games journalism as well as like a possible thing, or like games websites, but obviously you've been plugged into the YouTube stuff. What do you make of like all the fucking, like, it's hard to get like passionate about, like, I don't know if people are passionate about joining this industry anymore in a way that I feel like people like us were, and definitely you were.
Yeah, it's been crazy. Like, I think that's why I've gravitated towards TikTok and Twitch, because when I was, like a teenager, it was YouTube and like, yeah, I guess GameSpot, IGN, not GameFAQs, but GameFAQs even looked like a testing ground where people would write facts reviews. I would write reviews on GameFAQs, and like, and then now I'm thinking like something awful with the game forums, NeoGAF, like, ooh, that felt like my college of internet gaming. Like, okay. And then when I discovered Giant Bomb, like I was working my day job or night job. I was an assistant manager at a movie theater. And like every night I would have to close. It'd be 3 hours in solitude, but I would have my iPhone in my like vest pocket. I would just listen to the Bombcast. So like those voices were in my head as I was working around the theater. Like, and funny enough, like Jason is like every layoff and thing is shocking. But like when I saw the Jason news too, like it was like, holy crap, like everything that like is gone. And it's so weird. I'm on the other side, and like, again, thankful to be part of Noclip, but like, yeah, and again, like I worked at Mega 64 and I had to be let go because when I joined, it was like, hey, we're gonna be making sketches, everything is working well, and then the model shifted to, oh, now we have to make merchandise because YouTube does not pay out anymore. And they brought me on because I was good at making like quick, crazy sketches, and it's like, oh, like that's not the model anymore. Sorry. And it was like, so I kind of had the same shock of being let go from something I like grew up worshiping, and like, oh shoot, like, okay, and so. And yeah, and I think I always have this fear of like being let go or broken up with or things like that, where it's like I've always had like 3 jobs at once or multiple contracts because I'm so afraid of losing anything. And so like, yeah, it's scary and shocking. And I connect to what Jess was saying of like, there's a different vibe when you're in an office with people. Like, yeah, it does sound like there is that more creative spark of having those quick ideas, because I think about like the mailbag videos on Giant Bomb, where it would be like even like Jeff and Ben, like, oh, let's look at this stuff, and it's like that kind of stuff is like fun and silly, but yeah, it wouldn't be a thing of like, okay, 12 o'clock, you want to film this? It's like, no, it has to be off the cuff. That energy is there. And even at Mega 64, we would do it, then they still do, but like those kind of what we would call personal channel videos. We'd be at Denny's at 3 a.m. and okay, let's film, and like that's been the biggest thing that's really hit me over COVID is like I miss like that entertainment companionship, because I used to be in the theater scene up in LA, and like that chaos of like everyone is down to do something creative and weird, and when you're in your room alone, it's like I have so much energy in my head, and I start to like hate myself for it because I don't have an outlet for it. So so it's just like and again, I don't know what the future is, and I think that's why I'm feverishly studying TikTok and Twitch, seeing where it's going. And again, like, I love that we're all on a call and everyone here is so talented and has so many of their own strengths. And I just want to see a world where everyone can just make what they want, collaborate on a massive level. Like, I'm obsessed with wrestling, and again, like Giant Bomb, Gerstmann, there's a connection. But the whole thing with wrestling is like, everyone is an independent contractor, and everyone works for different federations and like scenes, and everyone's putting each other over. And it's like, I just want, like, even the core theme or idea of Giant Bomb, like, let's just have everyone making that kind of cool shit. But yeah, it's a lot. And like, I talked to Danny a few days ago, like when the most recent thing of layoffs happened, like it's the same thing, like that Survivor's Guild, where it's like, I still get to play games and do this for a living, but am I good enough? I'm just a kid. It's shocking. And like, again, I just try to focus on like my goals for the week, but it's like, I really can't plan for the future. Like,
yeah,
it's,
right.
Yeah, it's terrifying.
Yeah. It's like it's turned into a fucking supporters group, or what do you call it? Like a support group. Sorry.
Yeah.
Like AA or something.
Games industry trauma anonymous.
Yeah.
But it sucks. Like, that's, I think I went for a drive this morning because I've been trying not to like work in the mornings. I've been trying to take some like fucking self-care time, because I just, once the day starts, I don't stop working until I have to be a dad and a spouse. But like, fucking, it's like on both sides of it. Like, I don't want to have you on here and then minimize what happened to you last week or anything, Jess.
Nah, don't worry about it.
But like, as much as what's happening on that side is terrible and it freaks us out as well, on the audience side, it's not like the solution is like when we did this 6.5 years ago, started Noclip, or myself and Jeremy sort of did. Jeremy he had left GameSpot and was already doing freelance work and stuff. But like, I think I was the first in the GameSpot Giant Bomb ecosystem, CBS ecosystem, to do Patreon. I think Greg and the guys at Kind of Funny had done it, and that was kind of like the, I don't know, first through the wall kind of, so I could see it could happen. I remember talking to Vinny at E3 2016, him being like shitting himself for me, being like, "Are you sure? Like, is there going to be enough people?" And I'm like, "I don't fucking know." And then I talked.
He's so nice.
He's so nice. He's like, "Daddy." And then I asked Gerstmann as well, and he was like, "Just fucking do it." He was like, the worst thing that can happen is it fucking blows up in your face and you just come back. That's, you know what I mean? So
yeah,
it was like, it's like chaotic good or chaotic or whatever. I'm not sure where they are exactly.
chaotic neutral. I don't know.
But like, we're now in a situation where people have to fork out for fucking multiple, different patrons. Support Jess on Patreon, by the way.
Patreon.com/Voidburger.
But you know what I mean? It's like, it's also not fair for them to fucking bear the load of all this shit either.
Yeah, like, it totally, like, we've kind of like capitalismed ourselves into a very unique situation where, like, the only way to be sustainable is to be like owned by a large company or have investors or something like that. But it's not even about sustainability. It's about this growth. And it's like, well, what if I want to be sustainable? It's like, okay, the only real option is to have a Patreon. What about all the poor fans out there that like multiple people and have to really like pick and choose between, like, okay, my $5, like, if I give $5 to everyone I like, I'm giving $100 away a month. That's a ton. Plus everybody else's like regular subscriptions to Netflix, Hulu, etc. Who knows what? It's like everything has turned into this subscription model. Like, it was a really insidious creep that, and it's like to the point where like people are a subscription model now because you're trying to monetize like the parasocial relationships that you're like trying to like not purposefully form, but like, like people want to support people they like. And it's like, it's a very strange situation. I just hate that we're all here, like, in this layout of how it has to be right now. It's just a mess.
And then it's sort of like, it almost creates more antagonism, because what's happening then is that every individual, and it's not anyone's fault who's like signing up to any of these things, but if you're making a purchasing decision, which effectively is what's happening then, is that then you are like invested in the thing that you're weighing up your options, so it's inevitably making conflict where there is no conflict, because you're having to pick between, Noclip or Kind of Funny or Nextlander or Jeff or Voidburger or Fire Escape or whoever the fuck it is, because like you can't, or you have to pay for them all so that you don't feel bad. And it's like, what are we?
I mean, I have like Oh, I've like always had a policy of like no guilt when you have to leave a Patreon. It is fine. Do not worry if you cannot support me. I want you to make rent and have food. Like, don't give me your emergency money. Please, God, no. And if you have to leave for any reason, it's fine. You don't even have to tell me why. It's fine. Like, you'll come back if you want to. That's cool. Like, because I know how like absolutely stretched thin everyone's wallet is with all these people that you want to support, while also being able to like watch a Muppet movie when you want to because it's only on Disney Plus. Like it's just ridiculous.
My kid will not let me watch Muppet Christmas Carol. She thought it was boring.
What?
Too much talking.
Blasphemy.
Too much talking, she said. Too much talking.
Send her back to the store.
I know.
Wherever you
Yeah,
got
exactly,
her, return
yeah.
her. Mm-mm.
I've got buyer's remorse. I can't. She's 4.5 years. I'm in the hole. I can't. I have to.
No child of mine would ever say that to me.
I know. Michael Caine. Come on.
Michael
He's a
Caine.
legend.
She'll grow into
She
it.
owned Charles
She'll grow into
Dickens,
it.
man. That's like
Exactly. If Dickens isn't good enough for you, then come on. Like,
Oh, man.
it's not okay.
What a scrub.
But yeah, it's like at least under the corporate model, when the times are good, you can have a situation like GameSpot, which I don't want to fucking break any of my end. I don't know, but like I don't think the site was making money for any of the years I was there, I don't know. Also, I should mention that like at a company like CBS, the way in which profit structures are laid out and who gets what money and all that sort of stuff is really weird and has all these grandfather clauses for big sites and all this sort. So it's all fucked anyway. But like, at least in that situation, you're spending someone else's money to make the fun stuff.
Yeah.
That's good. You're spending all this corporate money to make the fun stuff, and then it's not this other scenario where you're having to ask people. It's
Yeah, it's like where you're owned by a corporation, but you have subs, and it's like where are we then?
Yeah.
Like what is the benefit of being owned by a corporation if it's shaken out this way where people are getting laid off randomly?
Right.
Like, I've seen a bunch of comments that's just like, what am I paying for? Like, I thought that this was to keep people working at this thing and making the stuff I like. Like, what? Like, I didn't consent to these people getting laid off by paying for this service. And it's like, man,
yeah.
I don't entirely disagree. Like, I don't know how much I can say NDA wise, but it's just like, that does stink, especially, like I said, in this atmosphere where it's just like everyone, you have to, pick and choose who you support. You have to compare who's the most bang for your buck. And it sucks when there's it's unfortunately like kind of a race to not the bottom, but the race to be the cheapest and the most worth your dollar.
Yeah.
And there's tons and tons of streamers, there's tons and tons and tons of YouTubers that provide a ton of stuff constantly on regular schedules and all this stuff. And it's just like you're up against that. And those are people that are practically free radicals and they make their own schedule and they don't have to get things approved and all that stuff. And it's not a too many cooks situation.
Right.
So it's just like this cascade effect of like just like tragedy. Like we want to make stuff, it's just it stinks and I feel bad for everybody ever.
One of the things that's been on my mind a bit, and we've talked about it with our patrons a lot and trying to figure out like how do you solve this issue of like the what we're talking about, the having corporate money come in that sort of like relieves the need for all that sort of stuff, and like talking about like having a sort of B2B business in the background. So instead of being corporate owned, be also owning the corporation that's doing that work and like doing sale relate, but like then there's conflict of interest issues depending on what industry you're in. Like if we became a video production company as well in the background, and then that funded, wages, and then over here was like fun stuff, that could be a way of like ciphering money out of the corporations that have it and then producing good work out of it. But it creates its own sort of layer of issues.
It's very nebulous.
It is, yeah. And then and then naturally you need to be opaque with that stuff, because if it's client facing, you honestly can't talk a lot about that stuff. So you're right, it creates an issue.
And like, again, we're in this era of Patreon where transparency is
So
super
important,
valued. It's so important. And it's like, because you're owned by a corporation, you simply cannot have that. And that's something I always like struggled to understand, because I don't know, I'm just like, why not? Like, it wouldn't hurt us. Like, I I just never understood that. But it's just like the way it is. And it's like, how do you compete with like people that have Patreons and they just tell you like, hey, I have a surgery coming up, so I'm not going to be streaming for a week or something. Like, you can't just like easily do that at a corporation, you know? But it's something people value a lot nowadays, that kind of transparency.
I always wonder if there's an interesting model like the people who made Stacklands. I think they're called Sock Pop. They're like a collective of indie game devs. The way I believe that they operate is that they all make a bunch of little games and release them as a collective. And the idea is that one of them will pop off eventually, make a bunch of money, and then by having sort of a generous profit sharing model, they're allowed to like keep the ship afloat. So when like Stacklands comes out and it's $3 or whatever, and it becomes sort of like a micro mega hit, it ends up sustaining other people who are making like some of their games are like $2-3, and they're like a little sci-fi low poly bounty hunter sim, and games like that maybe sell like 100, 200, 1,000 copies. I don't know. I haven't looked at the numbers on that specific one, but I think that's an interesting model. I always wonder if there's something more like a workers co-op that could happen in games media. I just think that's like a big step to form, and I often feel like a lot of the Venn diagram of people who are like doing really creative work and people who are really good at the sort of like P.T. Barnum side of things, where they're able to be their own carnival barker. It's a very slim crossover, and so I think it's probably I wonder if that the kind of thing is inevitable, or if it's sustainable, or if it's just like if it's a matter of time, but it's just kind of a very specific crossover of skill sets to make something like that happen.
Well, I do know that there is one video game co-op called The Glory Society, and it's run by Scott Benson, the director of Night in the Woods. I don't know if they've made anything yet, but I love it. I love the idea.
That's awesome.
Does Nebula is that something like that? Nebula's the network with like H-Bomb and a bunch of those.
Yeah. I have no idea how that works. Actually,
I know they have a subscription model on it, and there's also like, but I know a lot of that stuff also goes up on YouTube. I'm not exactly sure how.
Like there's some exclusives depending on like who's doing it. I don't think H-Bomb has any Nebula exclusives. Okay. It might be like a early access thing. I could be lying. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I know Jacob Geller also has videos where some of the content stuff gets flagged on YouTube. So I think he did his Immortality video obviously had a bunch of like nudity and stuff that YouTube doesn't want to monetize or would take your video down for. And I wonder if that's like an interesting use case for Nebula, is kind of things that might not do well on YouTube because of the content restrictions and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that stuff seems to be getting squeezed a little bit more recently as well. Don't be cursing in the first 8 seconds, motherfuckers.
Welcome
to my darn video.
Gosh darn it.
That was a difficult piece of news for Giant Bomb to deal with.
Kind of 8 seconds.
We curse a lot. Like, it's just normal. And it's like, oh my God, I have to think about this now? That stinks. It's just how I talk.
Same.
Yeah. It's been, less than a week since you became an independent content creator again. What do you, it's a shitty question to ask, but like, what do you think, about what you might do in the future? Like, I'm sure in the short term, medium term, you've obviously, have all the tools and creativity and talent to do a lot of your YouTube stuff and Twitch streaming and all that. But like, does it make you less inclined to work for another company, given that this stuff can just come out of nowhere? Like the way Frank was saying, like once this shit happens to you, it's like...
like it's just like you'd have to be incredibly optimistic, to want to, try out for another similar role at a similar company, knowing what just happened to you and that it could happen again at any point in time. No warning, no nothing to do with your performance or anything like that. It's hard to, I think everybody wants to work in a meritocracy, right? So it's like, and a lot of these, companies just, it ain't be like that. And yeah, like, I mean, for the time being, I'm just, going back to streaming because I missed it. I haven't been, I didn't shut down my Patreon when I joined GB, but I was basically, hey, like, it's a hiatus. I'm not going to be doing anything terribly exclusive over here because I got like a real ass person job over here. But like, kind of rejuvenated my Patreon, all this stuff, getting back into managing my little Discord community that I let gather dust for quite a while there, and I feel bad about
I bet
it.
that was pretty active on Thursday.
Yeah, lots of new people. It was really, really fun, actually, because they're all sweethearts from the Giant Bomb fandom. Like, the Giant Bomb fandom are so friggin' nice.
Giant Bomb
like,
fandom does take on a different meaning, though. That's
they ruined they had to go and ruin a perfectly fine-ish word of fandom, and now it's great. I got to figure out a better name for them. I don't know. That's why people call like their fans like goofy little names, just in case.
What do we call ours? Clippers? The LA Clippers?
Little clippies.
Yeah.
Little clippies.
Patrons.
Microsoft clippies.
Yeah. Oh, that's good.
There's a doc in that. We should do that one. Do you ever, yeah, sorry, go on.
For now I'm just going back to streaming and making whatever I feel like. I do want to make a Sam Barlow video. I'm sorry in advance. I know you're buddies.
You should have come on last week. Well, I wouldn't say we're buddies, but we did have. Was it last week? Was it a week before? I think it was
2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
I don't know. My mortal enemy. No, he's not. I'm sure he's perfectly fine to have a pint with or whatever. I've got some criticisms though. But I'd like to make a video about all that stuff, all my beefs with his work, just kind of seeing what kind of opportunities arise. I'm definitely open to like contract work, freelance work for now. I just don't want to work for like a big ass corpo thing. So like smaller little indie things, absolutely, like smallish game studios, stuff like that. I don't even know if I'd want to work for like a actual real deal game studio because like they get hit by these same sort of sweeping layoffs too. Like if I were to work at like, I don't know, Bethesda or something, it's like, who's to say the same thing wouldn't happen to me if I was in video there? Like my soon-to-be husband, he thank you. He works at Volition, and he was laid off from Volition a couple of years ago.
Right.
Just like out of nowhere because Agents of Mayhem did not do so good. But for reasons. But and that was like awful because it had nothing to do with the video department. Absolutely nothing to do with that.
Downsizing just kind of takes everyone out, right?
Yeah, and that was like totally devastating for him. He got hired back eventually, thanks to the efforts of a very close friend of ours. It's just like, you're always just kind of bracing yourself. Like it's hard to like feel any sort of like job security if you're in a large-ish corporate situation, especially. So, I mean, I'm sure it also happens in smaller places, but it doesn't feel as, sweepingly random, I think.
Yeah, I think, we've had a lot of chats. I felt a lot of pressure during COVID to sort of being somewhat on the opposite end of that issue as well as that issue because the money is coming in as Patreon, but also supporting a sort of a wider team of people as well and making sure that, especially during pandemic when the jobs that freelancers were being asked to do was all hazard work, wasn't it, Jeremy?
Yeah.
It was like
fucking
stuff that people did not want to do who were employed in places. So it kind of didn't help things either. I thought we'd come out of it, I know we're not out of it, but I thought on this side of it, we'd all feel a bit of a breath of fresh air. But these layoffs like here in the Bay Area, 40,000 people lost tech jobs.
Man, I cannot believe. Jeez.
Fucking
in like the highest cost of living place, like on Earth, maybe. I'm not really sure.
They'll never get jobs that pay the same anywhere else.
Yeah,
like
it's just like ridiculous. Yeah, because everyone's gonna hire back at a lower pay grade because they can, because capitalism sucks.
So many people. Like, how do you fire 10,000? Google fired 10,000 people. The fuck?
I can't wrap my head around. Like, I don't know if people are meant to be in a corporation. I feel like it is adverse to human life to form these corporations and have thousands, maybe millions if you're Google or something. I don't know how many people work for Google, shitloads. But like, it's just like that's not a community. Like, you can just fire people at any point because you don't know them. You don't know what their issue is. You don't know if they have kids, if they're sick, if they're disabled. It's just like poof. Like, there's no support there. And then oftentimes like they have this front facing, public face where it's just like, we're a big family though. And it's like, no, you're fucking, fuck you. No. Do not lie to our faces like this. No, like ridiculous.
and especially the swift nature of it. And again, I'm speaking from a place of ignorance. You know about this, and obviously Frank has spoken to it as well. Of the like if there's like a degree of like change, humans are incredibly adaptive to change. As long change usually happens in a sort of on a sinus wave. You know what I mean? On a bit of a curve. You kind of see it coming. Whereas like when you get fired out of nowhere, that's like a car crash. That's like a traumatic event that just fucking happened out of nowhere on a Tuesday afternoon. You know what I mean? Like just boom. That's different.
Yeah.
So and that I feel like that happens at that level of sort of mega consolidation, corporate level layoffs that didn't exist back when you worked in your local whatever the fuck it was. You could probably smell it coming, maybe. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's like this is all made all the more cruel by the fact that we are like, our insurance system is completely reliant on our employment, which is just like, okay, we got a busted situation here that is just simply not conducive to human life. And, we're going to give these corporations like so much power, so many tax breaks, so much money switching hands that they don't even know what they're buying half the time, right? So it's just like very strange, very cruel, very frivolous feeling.
Yeah, all of us, I believe, are, I don't want to speak to anyone else. I shouldn't say that maybe, but like, this Noclip is not a corporate entity that pays salaries. Like we are basically at the moment bring in monthly about the same as what we did 6.5 years ago, but we have way more stuff going on and people doing stuff. So we've gotten smarter maybe about running the business, but like, we're not at that level. And, independent insurance is incredibly fucking expensive. Yeah. So then that's layered on top of everything else, for folks who aren't in that position. So like, yeah, I hear what you said. Especially when we had a kid, I remember thinking like the amount, how high that had to get. And my wife, we had a bunch of medical stuff happen in the past couple of years as well, which sort of added to that. And then you just, and I've come from Europe, so I'm like fucking like twinkle toes being like, what's going on? I left GameSpot.
You naive little fool.
I have to what's a copay? Copay?
Oh, it's when you pay $250,000 to just check out your bad knee.
For the privilege of having a child.
This is a check. Oh man, when we got the invoice, which like, says how much and everything is like mega inflated because it's fake money, because like what they're charging is actually based on these other fucking things. So you're just like, a fucking bedpan costs 10 grand, and you're like, what the fuck?
Right.
I'll bring I'll
bring a mason jar.
BYO
BP.
B? Is it? Yeah.
P.
BYOP.
It's the new BYOB.
Fuck. All right.
It's messed up. It doesn't have to be this way.
Let's fucking, you know what? Like, I feel like I've never been to like an AA meeting. I should probably go to one actually, but I've never been to an AA meeting. I've never been to like, but I feel like you shouldn't because we've already talked for like an hour now, but I feel like we should have some sort of positivity about what we've done for the week or something. So let's go around and everyone can pick a game that they played and enjoyed in the past week that they can talk about. And I'm now looking at my list, and the only one I've written down is Forespoken, so I've already fucked myself.
Oh, no.
Frank, first of all, fill us with laughter and love. What game? This is your responsibility, or you're fired.
No. So my A to B with this is I don't know. I think beginning of this year, it's like I just want to focus on stuff that makes me happy, and less so trying to keep up with, like we talked about games media, but it's like, and I remember, I forget who tweeted about this, but someone I think who used to be with Giant Bomb, who had been laid off, they tweeted something. I think it was Drew Scanlon was like, "Oh, I get to just play the games I want," and I was like, "What? You can do that?"
Crazy.
And so, like at the beginning of the year, I was making resolutions or figuring it out. But like Persona 4 had been the game I've been wanting to play forever, and I was like, you know what, fuck it, I'm gonna get it. And I've sunk so much time into that where it's like, why do I want to play anything else? This is just, it's so good. But again, one of the core themes of Persona 4 is the power of friendships and upgrading your social links and stuff like that. Got a text message from my friend Eric Bedour, who I used to work with at Mega64, who's now at Rooster Teeth. He texted me and Brian, my streaming partner, and he was like, hey, have you guys tried Back for Blood? It's on Super PlayStation Plus or whatever. It's free. And so I started playing. I played it months ago or a year ago, whenever it came out, on the Xbox Game Pass, but that was only with my Game Pass ecosystem friends. But like Eric doesn't fuck with Xbox, so now all of a sudden it's unlocked, it's free. for all my PlayStation ecosystem friends. And so like now, and crossplay is good. So we've been playing Back for Blood again, and it's like that 6 months later where it's like it's patched, it's really smooth.
Oh, cool.
I think at first there was a lot of glitches or crossplay was buggy. I just remember there was hesitancy to getting into it. So we've been playing that, and we've had like 2-hour sessions, and it's really fun. The gunplay is good. It also fills the hole that like Call of Duty Zombies has been missing, because they made that so unbelievably confusing and frustrating. But Back for Blood is good, and yeah, I'll just say like it's great if you have a crew of friends to play with. It seems patched and smooth now. Crossplay works great, and it is on Game Pass, PlayStation Super Plus, Turbo, whatever you want to call it. But again, the Persona thing too, where it's like, ultimately, it doesn't matter, at least for me a lot of the times, it doesn't matter what the game is. But like when you get an activity with a bunch of friends together, then the stuff we are joking on top of shooting zombies is very fun. So that's been like complete like surprise to get back into. Back for Blood, and then my single player game, Persona 4, which again, I remember like yesterday having choice paralysis with my free time, where it was like, what should I do? And then I saw the Steam Deck, I picked it up, I started Persona, and then I was just sitting like in a weird position for like an hour, just So that's been like my medication game is Persona 4, and yeah. So.
Nice. Back for Blood is like it still costs $60 on Steam. I feel like they should maybe knock that down just a wee bit. Yeah, it had mixed reviews and still does on the all reviews, but very positive on recent reviews. So yeah, they must have tightened it up a little bit. I wonder what Turtle Rock are going to do next. Did anyone else ever play it? I know we talked about it a while back ago. I know me and Jeremy hadn't. Jess, have you played much Back for Blood? Were you much of a Left 4 Dead head back in the day?
I was into Left 4 Dead 1 and 2, yeah. When I had like a whole bunch of little Steam friends and all that
right.
stuff. But yeah, like I just kind of like when they fell off it, like I fell off it, and there hasn't really been a game that has replaced that. And I also kind of fell out with that little group of friends anyway, because it was over 10 years ago. Yeah, I mean, I've been interested in Back for Blood. Also, Dead by Daylight, the horror
I've always
one?
wanted to play that, because they always come out
that
with
the one
like
I'm thinking of?
I think so, right? They always come out like Hellraiser's in the game, and now fucking Spider-Man's in the game or whatever. Yeah, I've always wanted to play. Is that like another asymmetric, right? Like one is the killer and the rest are kids?
Like you're like Freddy or Jason or whoever, and everyone else is a little like a goofy teen trying to not get killed by them or kill them in return. I don't really know. Like I have a couple of friends that are into it, and I just haven't had the time to like devote to be like, okay, I'm going to try to get into this new like asymmetrical semi-co-op big situation. And I probably should. I got a lot more time now, so I probably should give it a shot.
What have you been playing? Did you play much since last week? Off stream? I know you played a bunch on stream as well.
Mostly on stream stuff. That my medicine though is Stardew Valley, which I have a sincere addiction to, because like I'll play a shitload of it. Like I have too many files that are at like 40 to 60 hours, and we'll start a new file, and my newest file is 80 hours.
Wow.
And
why do you start a new one? Is the early game just more enjoyable, or?
Yeah, like, and it's just like, it's also like, oh, like if I go back to this thing, which I haven't been back to this farm in like 6 months or something, like I don't know what I was doing. I don't remember my goals.
Oh, yeah.
I don't remember what my crops are. I don't remember who I was romancing or whatever. How many fish I've caught. So I don't know. There's just something really nice about a clean slate. You wake up on that farm. There's a ton of trees and rocks, and the world is your oyster, and just shape it. And it's like, ooh, that control is so nice. Those little attainable little tasks are so juicy. Ooh, I love it.
Yeah.
And yeah, like I was shocked to bust out my Steam Deck and look at how much time I had spent on that file, because yeah, it was 80 hours, and I felt like a real piece of shit a little bit for playing that much of the game again. Because I'm an idiot that's like, I keep telling my fiance that like I'm not into JRPGs. They're too long. And here I am playing this fucking thing for the 7th time for 80 hours on a single file.
You live in rural Illinois. Did you ever think about just starting a new farm, like a real farm?
I know, right? I don't like the outdoors. We mentioned this when we were first talking about everybody going hiking and clearing their head and feeling euphoric. And I was just like, the outdoors? Can't.
Rough winters, in fairness, where you are. Yeah. We're on easy mode out here when it's not like monsooning for 3 weeks.
I would love to live in California. Like, seems like, you get fun weather. You get the crazy monsoons. You get the weird the earthquakes.
Yeah.
Those seem a little
They're kinda
fun
fun.
when they're not devastating.
Yeah.
The regular
They
ones
tend
seem
to
a little
just be
fun.
kind of, unless, every 20 years you get one that kills a dozen people, but like that's the cost of a couple of little fun jiggles, yeah.
But it's like, we've got like tornadoes. Those are straight up not fun. Like, there's no fun version of that.
No.
You don't get a little tornado as a treat.
That's like nature's getting fired, having your house hit by a tornado, right?
whisked away.
Yeah, because you can't plan for it. There's nothing, you can't, like, your fucking house is where it is, and you can't decide the tornado just appears. Then
Better have a basement.
better have a basement. Basement is like nature's Patreon or something.
There's something there. Is that anything?
Someone else
Is this anything?
figure out this analogy for me, please. Jeremy, have you played much? I know you were out and about a lot this past weekend.
Yeah.
So
I have a little totally legal device that runs emulators, all for games that I own and BIOS that I've extracted from my own console, of course. 'Cause,
The Steam Deck.
yeah,
you
it's
mean.
it's something like the bastard child of the Steam Deck.
it's like the Stom dock.
Yeah, this is some dog
Like,
from
the Kirkland signature.
Gob Nowl. I have been playing Final Fantasy IX because it's from the era of Final Fantasy games that I love the most. Sort of like 6 through 10 is my wheelhouse. And
So I've been trying to get better
Okay.
at this. Final Fantasy IX is the one with
yes,
Zidane.
it's the one with Zidane. It's when they went 8. 8 was like, oh, it's so realistic, and everyone has realistic proportions, and they were like 9. Everyone has giant heads.
This is why I always think that the one with Zidane is
Yeah.
8 and the one with Leon, I think, is
Yeah.
9 because the proportions are different, and I just think like the chibi one must have came out.
You would
earlier
think
for
so.
no
Yeah,
reason.
no,
Right,
totally.
yeah.
Yeah, because 8 looks
it's a
incredible,
dumb
even though it's
thing.
kind of bizarre. I like 8 as well. But yeah, Final Fantasy 9 is I've just been trying to like I get so in my own head when I play long games like that because I'm like, this is such an investment of my time. Am I spending time well? Is this the game I should be playing? And I was finishing up house sitting with a friend up north and for 2 cats, and I was playing Final Fantasy 9 on my handheld, and 2 cats were laying on my body, and I was like, you know what? This is like I feel like I need to do more gaming like this, where I'm just throwing myself, like treating this like a good book and just like enjoying it for what it is. And I don't even think
That's
it was
like,
beautiful.
That's time perfect.
It was. I don't have any pets either, so I was like, "This is so novel to me." Like the person I was with,
You got to get those deer, man. You got to figure out how to get those deer to come into
I
your
know.
house.
Although they switched off
gotta-
my well water recently, they kicked the
Yeah.
switch, so we got a feud going on.
That's because they're trying to get your attention.
That's so true.
They want to come in.
That's so true. You're
It was
right.
raining for 3 weeks, and they were like, "Come on, man."
If you're cold, they're cold. All right, just let
Yeah.
them in.
apples, there's only so many fucking apples we can eat off this tree. Let
true.
us inside. Let's have some goulash.
Yeah, so until the deer are domesticated, I'll just have to enjoy other people's cats. But yeah, I was just like just throwing myself into a JRPG and kind of not thinking. That's what happens with Persona 5. I play 10 hours of Persona 5 every year, and I think I'll finish it by 2030 probably. That's what I'm
Oh, the same
Yes.
file.
Oh yeah. No.
Oh,
I
okay.
picked up
Yeah, I
where-
thought you were restarting.
No,
every
no,
time
no.
as well,
I'm just slowly making my way. I'll mention it like once a year to my friends, and they'll be like, "Are you still playing that game?" But yeah, Act 1 should be wrapping up by next year. I think we're really getting there. But yeah, just like I don't know. I feel like JRPGs kind of hit the same spot as books for me as a kid. Like they were just sort of a little world to get lost into. And as a kid, I thought way less about whether this is like a good game or like a well-paced story or the character craft is good or like the story is going in places that are worthwhile for me to experience. And 9 is one I've bounced off a couple times, and this is the farthest I've ever gotten it. I'm like 5 hours in, which is not that far, but I kind of just started it. So yeah, I've just kind of been trying to be a little less analytical about my enjoyment of games, especially because we like work in a field related to video games a little bit. I tend to kind of play games and think about like, would this make a good video essay? Is this like a good documentary we should do? Should I like interview this person who made this? And if so, like what questions do I want to ask them? And then it's like, I'm not going to fucking make a Final Fantasy IX documentary. So it just feels like kind of like fun and light. And yeah, it's nice just to enjoy it for the inherent experience and not any sort of other trappings of playing games.
yeah, not ruining my love of games has been like a very important part about doing the Noclip stuff. Is like trying to, whenever it happened, just being all right, okay, what am I fucking up on the work side or the home side that is like making this feel weird where I don't want to. Because then what's the fucking point of any of it? I've mostly like I said, I played like a couple hours of Forespoken last night. It is what a lot of people are saying. It's kind of like a, to me, it's just like a PS3 game. It's just like they used to make these games. Remember, they were just like kind of like
that's the vibe I've been getting. Yeah,
just like
PS3 vibe.
I don't know if is it a B game or like a double A game or whatever the fuck you call it. But these games don't really exist anymore. They just don't have the budget and like have like sort of hokey writing and the gameplay is this way. And it has a lot of like the Japanese trappings of stuff that I don't like in games that I do enjoy. Like, you know, in Yakuza where you're playing, especially early on in that game, and you know, I'm only like 2 hours into Forespoken, so take this all with a fucking huge pinch of salt, but a lot of stop and starting, a lot of like dialogue, a lot of pop-ups reiterating something they told you that's obvious about gameplay, and you're just like, come on, man, let's get into it. But it is wild seeing, I don't know, I think just people are, I think after last year and just all the games that were delayed, any big game that has like some sort of AAA sort of feel around it, people are really wanting to be good so that we can kind of like all dive into it. And there's just, I feel like there's a lot of disappointment around Forespoken because it's not that. And I didn't follow the marketing much, so maybe they marketed it as something that was like a bit more AAA, but like games like God of War have a lot to answer for because they've sort of like fucked everyone else. You know what I mean? In terms of like expectations from these like third person, you know, games or even open world games. Like, you know, if you compare this to Horizon or something where just in terms of budget and person power and what the game detail, all that sort of stuff, it's not that. It's a smaller team, you know, making it. I think we're just badly, you know, expectations just not there anymore. Like if you released this game 10 years ago, maybe it finds an audience, but it's going to disappoint more people than anything maybe. Yeah, so a bit of a bummer. The thing that I've been doing that I've been enjoying is I've really sort of in earnest started getting into the tapes, the horde of tapes that we're sort of talking around. We'll do an announcement on it at some stage, but tapes with games on them. But like
he said it.
But there's a whole fucking room of them out there. I had to get a U-Haul. There's a whole so the act of digitizing basically 10 years of game history is kind of what I'm trying to do at the moment. And to the side, if you're watching the video version of the podcast, there's like VHS and Betacam players, rack mounted ones with my camera turned off there. With like, so I've been doing a lot of like testing of like composite and S-video and component and what looks good and trying to strip. I used an HDMI little box, but that had an upscaler in it. So taking that out of the link. So I'm getting the purest version of the tape so that we can upload these to archive. And then, because my fear is that like we could do AI upscaling on some of this stuff because like a lot of this is like videotapes of like E3 assets from 1999. Like I've already found footage of games that were cancelled, that there's game. Yeah. Like I found like a bunch, one of the coolest things I found was like even stuff that's like already out there, which is probably like 60-70% of this is like, I found like it was a 50-minute long, no, was it? Maybe 30-minute long, basically Konami B-roll of Metal Gear Solid 3 from 2004, I want to say maybe. Does that sound right? I forget when Snake Eater came out. Somewhere in time right now.
Maybe.
Early aughts, let's say. But, and a lot of this is online. So everything I'm doing, I'm like have an Excel spreadsheet and I Google it to see what's up there. And a lot of it's up there. But it's up there in like 240p or 360.
Yeah, potato quality.
Right,
yeah.
upload. So it had like compression from 20 years ago. It's probably been copy pasted from 3 different sources before it hit YouTube. So when I do a side by side, it's like night and day. So like loads of this stuff is just like, and then I think, okay, the reason we need to get the raw version up on like archive and then also maybe put a mirror up on YouTube is because AI upscaling has gotten so good in the past couple of years that in like 3 or 4 years time, it might be even better. So I want to have the raw version up so that in 5 years time, if stuff is really good, we haven't like stripped any of the information out that like an upscaler could have used.
Nice.
So, and I thought like when I started this thing, and we'll have a video on it on Noclip in the next like couple of weeks and sort of like telling people what the project is. Going to take a couple of years probably to go through all this stuff and see what's in there. But when I started, I was really intimidated by it. But the process of actually sitting down and watching this shit and like recording it is very fast and very fun. It's just...
I love old 90s VHS. Like me and my partner have gone through archive.org just like looking for weird stuff like randomly and have found like some very strange gems. I found like okay, sounds weird at first. Playboy,
Okay.
it's a weird way to start a sentence, first of all. Playboy made a VHS that was like just like dirty uncle jokes, like just like dirty jokes that your uncle tells at the wrong time, and they're all skits.
Oh my
They're all
God.
acted.
Oh,
and
so like they're
I-
acted like there's an uncle and somebody listening to the joke and
Or it's just like, guy walks into it's something,
Oh.
instead of saying like guy walks into a nurse's office and says, "Hey nurse, something's wrong with my dick." They'll shoot it. They'll shoot a
guy
guy
walking in.
just
Oh
my
barging
God,
into a
dude.
nurse's office and saying, "Hey nurse, something wrong with my dick." And it's just like, we were fascinated by this, and it was the only one we could find. It was from like 1994 or
Wow.
something. I was mind boggled. There's boobs in it because some of them are like, like this lady got caught cheating, and then some goofy, she's so blonde, she did that,
Yeah.
that sort
Wow.
of, caliber of joke.
God.
It's so like awful and wonderful at the same time.
Is there
So
a
you're-
laugh track?
Oh, good question.
Oh, is there? I want to say yes.
Because I'm just imagining this is like the Z tier Mad TV skits. Like I want to
Yes.
I want to watch this.
Yes.
Yeah. I have essentially like a degree in sketch comedy, so I'm like I have not heard of this. I need to study this.
There are only 2 skits in the whole thing that made us laugh. They were so bad.
man. Yeah, it's
Oh my God.
that level of like, and I feel like in this whole thing there'll be a lot of stuff that's just like, whatever. It's assets that are already out there, trailers are already out there. There's fucking gold in there somewhere, and there's probably a lot of like silver and tin. I don't know, but I'm excited to see it. Well, there was one we got that had like a bunch of EA stuff, and it had the original logo for Tiger Woods Golf, which I'd never seen before, of 2000, which looks absolutely insane. I should have taken a photograph of it. But it also had mocap of Madden 2000 and Knockout Kings. So it had like Oscar De La Hoya doing interviews while he's covered in like balls. And like none of this stuff is anywhere. Like, like who fucking, like a lot of this stuff no one's going to give a shit about. But like to 5 people, it's going to be like the most important thing ever.
Especially if they worked on it or something.
Right, yeah.
Right? Like, I love that. The idea that like someone who worked on it might discover it and be like, "Oh my God, right. I shot this," or "I was the guy that put the mocap balls on Oscar De La
Right.
Hoya," or whatever.
I'm hoping that we basically create this huge asset dump for video essays for the next 20 years. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I
It's
was
just
gonna
like-
say, like, from experience with the Phantasmagoria 2
All right.
essay, I had to like really just like try real hard to dive through the Internet Archive and find all these potato ass videos of like these short clips from like 90s and 80s shows and talk shows about like, just like queer panic stuff and gay panic and AIDS panic
Right.
and like all this stuff. And not a lot of that was archived very well, so it all looks like garbage and sounds worse.
Yeah, you're
So you're doing a great service. is
You're
what I'm
creating like the
saying.
raw materials for the video games industry's Adam Curtis, like the BBC archive of
Right,
all
yeah.
of just like random footage, and then someone sets it to The Cure, and over it does a very dramatic narration. I think,
Which I kind of feel like it's funny because a lot like the biggest pushback we always get on Noclip stuff is like, oh, you're just like making marketing for whenever you do the big studio docs, especially, right? You do a Crystal Dynamics or Bethesda or whatever, then it's like, oh, you're just making marketing material for studios, which I totally get. But in my head, when we're making this, I'm not making this for people today. I'm making these for people 20 years from now. So like, I don't fucking kind of give a shit. Like to me, it's like all the stuff that we now watch as retro or any like retrospectives you watch, you kind of take it for granted as that's the way it was. So like, it's trying to like I feel like we've always been making game preservation stuff, but we've been making it in real time. And this is a way for us to like kind of do that work a little bit backwards as well.
Oh, I'm excited to see these. Oh my God.
It's cool.
I can't wait.
We're going to try. I basically don't want to start putting stuff up until I have the process is the way it is, because I would hate for a bunch of video people and archivists to come up to me. I've been doing my due diligence and talking to people and doing research. I'd hate for them to come up to me 4 months in and say, oh, the head on your VCR player fucked all these or something. You know what I mean? I'm on my 3rd VCR player at the moment trying to make.
Wow.
Yeah, and they do not that beta player cost like $700.
damn.
Yeah.
They're back to the price they were when they came out.
Yes, it is. It is rough. I got one from San Francisco, which was good because I didn't want somebody to ship it because they would it would cost a lot of money and also probably come up. I shipped one thing that was heavy, that's a DV cam player, and all the legs on it were broken when it arrived, but it works. So it traps the tapes a bit, but I've loosened the thing, so It's okay. Well,
I grew up in an AV household
Oh,
because
really?
my dad worked with televisions,
wow.
and so he actually he could have gotten a job in sanitation and retired early, but instead, VHS was the future, so he went into VHS stuff. So we had Betamax players, we had Laserdisc, we had like every sort of goofy flash in the pan. Like this is the next big thing that's
Right.
going to be the thing that plays 40 minutes of something. Like it wasn't even like a ton of like footage or anything. So nostalgic.
There was, you mentioned Laserdisc. There was this thing that I was talking to Drew Scanlon and Rob Zachney last night because we have our Formula One podcast. And I was talking to him a little bit about the tape stuff. And I think it was Laserdisc. I forget the name of this thing. It's probably I don't open Discord because it fucks with our little system here. But he was talking to me about, because I was telling him about like trying to scan this stuff properly. And he said there was this Laserdisc, a mod which has come out in the past couple of years, which basically intercepts the RGB signal before it hits the component or whatever it is out on it, and so it gets I think 1080p signal from the Laserdisc, because that stuff was super high res, but like no cables or televisions were able to like take the signal
translate
in.
that,
Yeah,
yeah.
so they found this little thing. It has such a fucked up name. It's called the Domesday Duplicator.
Oh my god, dude.
And if you're in on YouTube right now, look up Laserdisc.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, there's a Laserdisc preservation comparison video of Domesday Duplicator versus Composite, and it is shocking how much better they are.
Ooh.
So I was like, fuck you. Do we need to do that? I don't think you can really get much more out of a beta tape, but who knows? Jess O'Brien, thank you so much for joining us this week. Absolute pleasure.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. Really, really fun to talk to you
Yeah,
guys.
an absolute blast having you. Send all our
And having a little therapy session with everybody.
seriously, it's
about all this
cathartic.
stuff.
exactly. I'll see you all here this time next week. Thanks so much. If people want to support your work, head over to, I'm guessing, patreon.com/Voidburger and twitch.tv/Voidburger.
Yeah, I also registered voidburger.com for all of the links
Love
in
it.
one
Yeah.
spot, so it's very handy.
Get it done. Love to see it. Thank you so much. I'd love to get you on again. It was an absolute blast.
Yeah, for sure, anytime.
I want to give a shout out to all our Battle Pass holders because I totally fucking forgot to give them a shout out again. I have also messaged them all. These are the people on our top tier Patreon, Jess, who we made up like a joke top tier Patreon so that they get their name mentioned on every podcast. And also I had to get their names tattooed on my ass. Not really. But also we did totally mess
What
up
if there's-
and forget to
If
get.
there's too many.
I know. Well,
you
that actually happened on Shift F1. We now have like.
Yeah, you
so
have to like eat a lot and make your
Yeah.
ass bigger to fit all the names, right?
Not a problem for me.
Stretch goal.
Yeah, stretch goal. Stretch mark goal. But I've messaged all the Battle Pass holders as well. Check your Patreon DMs, folks, because we are doing the Your Best Games of 2022 thing we'll do in the next podcast. So you can message us back with your favorite game of 2022 and some sentences about why, if you want, if you're a Battle Pass holder, and we'll read it out on the next episode. And those people are, of course, Jason Drury, Cody Krieger, Sven Huster, Forrest Pruitt, Andy Fagan, Cameron Ladd, George Sakotis, Jacob Godserve, and Tohir Teliev. Thank you all so much. Frank Howley, what are you doing with the rest of your day?
It's Wednesday, new comic book day. I already got my stack. I already picked up One Piece from the library, and I'm gonna go for a hike, and then gaming and Noclip work. But yeah, Wednesdays are like my favorite day.
Are you doing gameplay for anything we can talk about? I don't know if you are.
I don't think we can.
We have a lot of
but
stuff that we can't
yeah.
talk about, which we're going to announce soon. I was also playing a game today on something I cannot talk about that I was enjoying, but it'll be a Noclip doc in the next few weeks. We'll talk about it. Jeremy, what about you?
Oh, I'll be chipping away at Redacted and also working on a Signalis video essay that I'm very excited about. I would describe it as an anti-lore video. So if that sounds
Nice.
intriguing or confusing or paradoxical,
Nice.
I think it's going to be. I'm very excited about it. I've worked very fucking hard on it. Signalis is like one of the most important games to me in a very long time, so I want to do justice to such a monumentous piece of art.
Terrific.
I can't believe how good
It
that
is
game is.
unbelievable.
It doesn't make sense. That it's that
I'm
good.
playing through it for like a 2.5/3 time for capture for footage on this, and it's just
Yeah.
like I'm just loving it all over again. I never replay games either. It gives me this like claustrophobia that I'm wasting my life, and I'm like, oh no, this is where I'm
No.
supposed to be, is like just playing Signalis on a loop, which is appropriate given the game's themes.
Totally, yeah.
Yeah, good point. Look out for that on Noclip Crew. That's youtube.com/Noclip Crew video. Looking at the big document thing behind me, we have Redacted. Wipeout is coming along really well, so we'll have our Wipeout episode of Greatest Hits. We are also going to have the devs from Jet on soon. I think I'm recording that this week, actually. God, I should check my calendar. Because they are re-releasing that game. It's a really fascinating project that's going on there, and the original Jet came out, and they've basically done a bunch of work to it. I've been following those guys and talking to them privately for a while, so I think there's going to be a really fun conversation in that one. And I also recorded an interview yesterday for another Redacted. Look, we just need to fucking get those announcements out. We'll get them out pretty soon. We have one doc that is on one of the best games that came out last year. And we were okay to do the interview, but the developer doesn't do like webcam or get his face out there or anything. So instead,
Yoko Taro, I see you're talking to.
and I think it's somebody who's never done any video interviews and done very few interviews at all. So instead, what we're doing is we got somebody who makes video game puppets to make a puppet of the key art of the game. And we're going to use that instead of a webcam. So I think I either have to practice puppeteering or we have to hire a local puppet person.
That's a win-win.
Ship it to me.
Yeah, it's gonna be. So it's I got some photographs today of it in progress. So it's gonna take a couple of weeks, but we will have the puppet, and we'll be talking about that video game pretty soon too. And then of course we're doing Dwarf Fortress and Choo Choo Charles up in Washington in a couple of weeks' time.
Oh my god, I just beat Choo Choo Charles. I loved it.
Yeah, Frank's got that on his gameplay list as well.
So what a hoot. What a toot.
What a wild game. That kid is, I shouldn't say kid, that man he's a young dude, and he developed it on its own in a very short period of time with a lot of pressure on him as well. So I think there's a cool story there. That's a podcast. Thanks so much for hanging out, everyone, and we'll see you next week. Bye.